the Rambler Network.
No, it's not a glitch. You're seeing this podcast in your news feed again for the first time in over 2 years. I have returned for season 5, and yes, that was a network bumper at the beginning. I if you haven't been listening to my other podcast, I have a lot of explaining to do. So basically, while I took a hiatus from the Digressor, I have not taken a hiatus from podcasting. I have continued to post on Casablanca, which is my movie podcast, and I started Casablanca back in 2022 because I felt that that would be simpler because the Digressor was getting too complicated, and if you remember, if you remember, assuming you were a listener back then, whoever you are, I took a brief hiatus for like 6 months at one point in 2022. And in that time, I didn't want to stop podcasting altogether, so I started Casablanca as an easier podcast. Shorter episodes, minimal editing, record, quick edit, upload, something like that. Casablanca, on the other hand, I would try to have them be between 45 minutes and an hour and a half. And that's a lot of editing. And I started to, try to like up the production value as time went on, like adding background music occasionally, and I eventually I stopped doing that, and then on the YouTube version I would just try to like put like pictures and clips and stuff to go with what I was talking about, and I was making adding more and more work, and it was getting more complicated, and eventually that's why I stopped. I had kind of a burnout. Christmas 2022, it wasn't even a full episode because the Christmas episodes up till then I had basically in 2020 and 2021 I had done a full episode with somebody. I had a guest on for the full Christmas episode that day. And Christmas 2022, I didn't have anybody to do an episode with. I had 2 episodes to do. I had the Christmas episode of Casablanca and the Christmas episode of Digressor. And so I just made it like a quick 5-minute minisode. And you could tell when you listen to it, I just wanted to get it over with. And so it was basically hi, I'm just doing something real quick because it's Christmas. Bye. And so I was done with both podcasts for a while. And then I decided to continue Casablanca from June to December, and so I didn't have to worry about podcasting for half a year, and I only had to worry about it for the second half of the year. And I started thinking about it more, and I didn't want to just walk away from this podcast. I wanted to eventually come back to it, but I didn't want to go back to the all that work. It was too much, and I didn't want to do it. And I kept thinking the only way to make this work is to up the ante, to like up the value, and like make it bigger and bigger production. And I was trying to get an editor and a co-host, and I was trying to make it this big production. And every time I started to actually take it seriously and look into it, and it just kept stressing me out. I was like, I don't want to do that like right now. And finally, I just realized why am I making Digressor such an overly complicated thing? Because like with I'm not saying Casablanca is successful. I mean, I have somewhat of an audience. Like each episode gets like maybe 20 listens, which hey, that's more than Digressor really ever got. And so, to me, I was like, hey, Casablanca is booming. I am up to 75 episodes on Casablanca. Each episode has 25 episodes. And I have a schedule. I record in advance. And I don't mean just like the week before. I record usually months in advance and schedule them. I have a schedule. I know ahead of time, like before the season even begins, all the movies I'm going to cover, what each episode's going to be. I, in the 2 years since I walked away, since I went on hiatus on Casablanca, on Digressor. See, I'm getting them all mixed up. In the 2 years since then, I've actually learned a lot about, organizing a podcast and like editing and stuff. And because like with Digressor before, what I would do, I had no real plan, no schedule. And so sometimes I wouldn't know until I hit record what I was going to talk about. And that's not really the best way to run a podcast. And usually it would be like the day of. It's like, I'm going to record an episode, hit record. Okay, I'm going to talk about this. And then stop recording, upload it. And yeah, no. With Casablanca, I developed methods for scheduling and knowing ahead of time what episodes are going to be, scheduling the full season ahead of time, and sticking to a schedule. And I have decided with Digressor, that is what I will be doing. I will be taking what I learned working on Casablanca and then adapting it to the Digressor. Each episode will release on Sundays from January 5th through June 22nd, 2025. This season 5, there's going to be 13 episodes, and the reason for this is because currently there are 57 episodes, and I want there to be an even number. Like a good number, not like just some random number. See, like with Casablanca, there's 25 episodes a season. I keep it, like organized like that. And season 5 of Digressor is going to have 13 episodes, so that at the end, it's going to have 70 episodes. And then every season after that is going to have 10 episodes. I know ahead of time what the episodes are. I have them planned, I have them mapped out, and I feel more prepared this time than I did before. And so I feel ready to bring back the Digressor for season 5. And about that network bumper at the beginning, since now I have 2 podcasts I'm actively working on, and a third that I'm working on developing for later in this year that I'll talk about more later at a later date, I have decided that instead of having everything under the Digressor umbrella, which didn't make sense because that was just this podcast when I only had one podcast, and it doesn't. I always feel weird posting Casablanca stuff on the Digressor. It's also stuff, and I don't want to make a separate Instagram and everything for Casablanca, though I did for TikTok. I made a separate TikTok for Casablanca, and I kind of regret that now. I have now decided to start a podcast network specifically for my podcast, and I changed all the social media handles and everything. So if you look up the Rambler Network on Facebook and Instagram, Blue Sky, and on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, you're going to find me. The old Digressor social media accounts have now been changed to the Rambler Network. And yeah, uh, this is kind of exciting, honestly, not gonna lie. Also, Happy New Year. I'm posting this on New Year's Day. Scheduling this to post on New Year's Day. I never scheduled before with Digressor, so now will be scheduling. I've gotten so used to scheduling now that it's weird for me to be recording this close to the release date of an episode. So, yeah. um, kind of a little backstory on the bumper. So the voice you hear in the network bumper is my best friend Lindsay. I asked her if she could do that because originally I was just going to record myself going the Rambler Network, but I was like, you know what? It's just my voice. All you hear on here is my voice. I want someone else's, and since she's the most important person in the world to me, I asked her to do it, and she agreed. And so the it's actually two separate recordings. I recorded at church, like this, the chatter at church, like when everyone was up and chatting. I just hit record and just recorded for like 10 seconds. There's like 200 something people, I think. I don't know. There's a bunch of people there. Just a bunch of people talking. And I made sure to like get away from everybody, kind of like in a corner, so that I couldn't pick up like any one person. So I didn't pick up any like conversation. You kind of get more of an ambient sound of like general crowd speaking. And then after church, she and I found a quiet room, and I just recorded her saying the Rambler Network a few different ways, and then I just played around with the two recordings, edited it, until we got what you heard. So there's a little background on that. You know, good times, good times. Oh, I also decided for the closer, because before I was going have a good, I was like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. For Casablanca, I found a closer, and it made sense with the theme, which is movies. I say and cut, because movies. So since it's called the Digressor, I'm gonna end each episode with "But I digress," because I think that makes more sense than what I had been saying. Oh, and then one final thing. I will no longer intentionally be making episodes 45 minutes to an hour and a half long. I will be aiming for shorter episodes, much like Casablanca. The first episode, which will go live on January 5th, is roughly 15 minutes long. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for now, like shorter episodes. Think of this as kind of a mini reboot of it's more of a soft reboot of the Digressor. And I'm not doing like Doctor Who, I'm calling it season 1 instead of season 14. Which that made sense for them. And I like that they did that. I'm not gonna do that. This is season 5. Yeah. Plus, I think in order to count it as season 1, I would have to start a whole new podcast because my not hosting site wouldn't do that if I wanted to, but I don't want to. Anyway, this is, I think, the longest minisode I've ever done on this podcast. I think this is already longer than the first episode. So, or getting up to that point. Anyway, I'm going to end this now and get ready for the first episode of season 5 of The Digressor coming this coming Sunday.
The Rambler Network.